Nano Machine by Hanjo Wiolia. Chapter 393. Second Generation Chun Ma. Part 1. The command which came out of the Lord of the demonic cult's mouth made all the people of Wulin gathered in the Jin castle tremble. Indeed, they came to know that his purpose was to annihilate everyone who was on the castle grounds. The plan to drive the enemies into one place, which wasn't even in the domain of the demonic cult but in the realm of another faction, wasn't just bold but simply terrifying. He's Chun Ma? On the other hand, the faces of the four leaders of the forces of justice and the great leader, who were on his side, were in shock. They were shocked with his order to kill everyone in the castle grounds, but what shocked them even more was Chen Yuan referring to himself as the second generation Chun Ma. Chun Ma, heavenly demon. There was not a single person in the entire Wulin who wouldn't know that name. In the entirety of Wulin, he was known to be one of the four great warriors along with Lone Supreme Warrior, Dako Gyupi, Western Dharma, and Zhang Sambong. Chun Ma is a legendary figure, who was known to be the strongest in the history of Wulin and the founder of the demonic cult. Even though he pursued the path of demons, and even when his reputation was overshadowed by the other factions, he was still the only one who shook the entire Wulin. There was no way anyone would deny that Chun Ma was a legendary figure. Great leader Mok and the leaders of the forces of justice didn't know why Chen Yuan was calling himself Chun Ma. As far as they knew, the person named Chun Ma was a demon who walked like a king only to lose his way. Oh my, he called himself Chun Ma, is he also going to lose his way? Heavenly God. It was an unusual choice of word for the others. One thing was certain to them: when looking at Chen Yuan, they were constantly being reminded of the actions of Chun Ma, the original lord. Wah! Watching the warriors of the demonic cult march forward, shouting about killing everyone, the warriors of the forces of evil, Blade God's six martial clan and forces of great heaven took out their weapons as well. Chong! 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 The war, which consisted of the best from each faction, was no longer a war where only the leaders could be involved and ask the warriors to step back. This was turning into a war which could have a profound effect on the balance of power in each faction in the future. Damn it! Even before the lord of the demonic cult appeared, Garmojim of the Yellow River was worried that he would only get to take revenge on the lord but not be able to damage the cult. However, now it turned into a nightmare for the 17 river families which had accompanied him into the war. Whoa! Whoa! Seeing the man wield two swords in both of his hands, he immediately remembered what happened in the past. It was literally a slaughter. With thousands of people along with him, and in just half a day, they were being driven into a corner by the martial dual sword, Wan Jing. Garmojim did grow when compared to the past, but the energy he was feeling from the war instilled fear in him. This is my first task. This was supposed to be Wang Jing's first time working as someone's subordinate. He wondered what kind of battles would unfold while accompanying Chen Yuan and when he would be summoned, but seeing this sight, he couldn't help but feel satisfied. He was given the chance to annihilate the remaining heads of the river families, which had joined hands with the forces of evil. I'll grab the leader first. Tack. Wang Jing took a stance of javelin throw, and with all his might, he was ready to throw one sword to the place where Yellow River's Garmojim was. Damn it! Is he aiming for the leaders right away? It was impossible for him to step back as there were subordinates behind him. Garmojim gathered internal energy on the water dragon sword. Whoa! He was trying to look for the moment when the sword would come in contact with him, and he already had a nervous expression, but someone blocked it for him. The back view showed a man with white hair and a red sword on his back. He was no Duke Young, one of the six martial masters of Blade God's six martial clan. Thanks to him, Wang Jing, who was about to throw his sword towards Garmojim, stopped. Phew! Garmojim, who was nervous, breathed out a sigh of relief without realizing No Dukyang, who saved Garmojim from the crisis, began to release intense energy and spoke to Wang Jing. A man who aims for the weak to seem strong to others. Pathetic. Although he was a little mean, Garmojin couldn't help but frown at the words that called Wang Jing weak. However, No Dukyang wasn't concerned about it at all and gestured to the back to send a message. You should go and attack the podium by attacking with the remaining Yulin warriors, who are divided into 2 groups. Leave this to me. There was no choice given. Garmojim nodded his head and led the 17 river families superscript 1 asterisk and 100 warriors and advanced towards the podium. Is he one of the 6 martial masters that the Lord spoke of? Wang Jing's eyes sparkled. A person who wasn't the head of the clan, but one of the leaders, was in front of him. Although he hasn't competed with this man, Wang Jing knew right away that his ability was similar to his own. I never realized that there was such an old person in Wulin. You are a person who is valued. You are one of the 5 strongest warriors of Wulin. Only as I grow old will I be able to overpower you. They were arrogant words wrapped up in a polite manner. For a moment, neither of them spoke and they only looked at each other. Not a single person took a step ahead. They needed a proper provocation to move ahead. If you want to fight with a great opponent, how about you go fight with our Lord? At those words, the face of No Dukyang went stiff. He wanted to say something. He knew that he wouldn't win in a one-on-one battle with the monstrous lord of the demonic cult. Your mouth is the only thing that is strong. Our Lord has something specifically prepared for him, so you will have to fight me. Clang. Even before Wang Jing could complete his words, No Dukyang's bright red sword reached for the head of Wang Jing. There was no way that Wang Jing, who was in his best condition, couldn't prevent it. Lightly raising his sword to the side, he managed to block the attack. Kong. Surprise attacks don't work on him. This much was expected from one of the 5 strongest warriors. Keek. Wang Jing's greatsword shuddered. Yet, he wasn't pushed back, nor had he suffered any internal injuries. That power isn't normal. The 2 of them seemed to possess the same amount of power, which meant that their attacks would be nullified. That meant they had no choice but to confront each other by using qi. Let's do it right, old man. Lightly wielding the greatsword in his right hand, Wang Jing jumped for No Dukyang. Cha. 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 The true swordsmanship skill, which was just as anyone would expect from one of the 5 strongest warriors, this man, Wang Jing, was wielding a greatsword as if he was holding onto a branch. Nice. Tat attack. Perhaps he was too excited from seeing Wang Jing's swordsmanship. That's why No Dukyang performed a unique footwork of the extreme art to avoid letting the sword get too close to him without moving more than 3 steps. It was a risky gamble. Is he that confident that he can avoid getting hit by my sword? Without such confidence, no man would have stayed in the same place. However, No Dukyang made the right choice. The only weakness of the martial dual sword, Wang Jing, was that he used greatswords as his weapon, which made it difficult to use sword qi in close distances. This is going to be a close fight. Just the thought of it made a smile creep onto Wang Jing's lips. On the other hand, the Blade God's 6 martial clans warriors and forces of great justice were getting pushed back by the warriors of the demonic cult, contrary to what they had planned. Perhaps it was because of being with their lord, but the morale of the warriors of the demonic cult seemed to have soared to the sky. Wah! Slash! 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 If it was Chun Yuan alone, the opponents would have had an easy time to focus on him, but with his warriors in front of him, it seemed like getting through them would be tough. Whoa! You were well prepared, Lord of the demonic cult. Nam Dukyang's eyes raged in anger. How did he even get the idea of bringing in his men, disguised as officials of the palace? His audacity made Nam Gunkyong more furious. I need to pour all my power into my attacks to take down that guy. Where is he though? Although it was a difficult battle, the plan to take down Chen Yuan hadn't changed. Just cutting down Chen Yuan's head could change the entire scenario. In order to do that, the superior master-level warriors or clan heads had to move first. Move. Cha. 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 Quack. Nam Gunkyong unleashed his flame sword and defeated the warriors of the demonic cult who rushed towards him. In the meantime, he searched for the whereabouts of the other leaders of the Blade God 6 martial clan. They were moving forward little by little too, but the leaders couldn't be seen. Among the sounds of numerous people clashing, the exceptional sound of high-level people clashing their swords caught his ears. Ah! When he turned to that place, the leaders of the forces of justice and other clan heads of the Yulin faction were colliding with the warriors of the Blade God 6 martial clan. From the very beginning, the Yulin faction aimed to take down the Blade God 6 martial clan. Great leader. Forces of Justice's great leader, Mok, was competing with the one called Li Wook, who seemed like the one leading the Blade God 6 martial clan in the treaty. As soon as war started, Mok immediately moved to take Li Wook as his opponent. This is amazing. Indeed, he was one of the 5 strongest warriors of Wulin, who represented the Yulin. The 3 air swords, which Mok was handling, seemed effective in pushing back Sword Master Li Wook. Cha-cha-cha-cha-king. To create such formations using the air swords, he truly is a great man. Even Li Wook, who was a master in controlling air swords, couldn't help but admire Mok's skill. It displayed his will as a leader, who wanted to end the battle to avoid any more unnecessary losses. But to act so hastily against me means you are being arrogant. Cha-cha-cha-cha-ka-chang. Sword Master Li Wook created a net-like pattern to block the air sword. While raising energy in his left hand, he gestured the lift of something into the air. Cracks formed on the ground and the energy around split the ground as the chunks of stone soared high at once. Swoosh! 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 AV avoid it. It was so powerful that the leaders of the forces of justice and the others of the Blade God 6 martial clan, who were having their own battles in close-by places, tried to avoid getting hit. It was a technique where the force chi was used by those who reached the Supreme Master level. Huh. Each of those stones is moving with the speed of a released cannon. When Mok, who was a little startled, pushed his left hand, one of stones which was coming for him passed through the air sword and ended up cracking into multiple more rocks. Swoosh. Pa-pa-pa-pack. Ugh. Those fragments too? Ugh. The rock, which broke into multiple small fragments, showed incredible power. Enough to pierce into the bodies of nearby warriors. Step back. Don't get near their battle. Warriors of both sides decided to move away from them at the same time. It was a high-level battle which left viewers in awe. Huh. Is this the level of the 5 strongest warriors? It could be said that their confrontation looked like past human stage. It was tough for someone who was having a confrontation with Mok to help others in taking down the lord of the demonic cult. Leader. At that time, the voice of Dang Pilsun entered the ears of Nam Gunkyong. At a short distance away, Dang Pilsun was standing there, and it could be said that they had advanced around 15 steps closer to where the lord of the demonic cult was standing. The forces of evil are now blocking the warriors of the demonic cult. This is the right time to hit their lord. A voice filled with determination. As Dang Pilsun said, the 6 swords seemed busy fighting with the Yellow River members, Gar Mojam and the 17 river families, which came from the west. I thought they were nothing special, but I am impressed. Due to the nature of the forces of evil, Nam Gunkyong thought that they wouldn't move unless they were cornered. Of course, Nam Gunkyang didn't know that the forces of evil just took the easiest person to deal with by leaving Wang Jing to know Du Kyung. Member of the Alliance. You are not alone. Even after saying that too. Where is the Divine Master? This is our chance to take him down. With a secret move, we will aim for the Lord of the demonic cult. Secret? The word secret made Nam Gunkyung's eyes flutter. It seemed like he was talking about the same secret that Dang Pilsun was talking about before coming to Tongo. Dang Pilsun said that he was unmatched in terms of poison when compared to the demonic cult's poison clan head, Baek Oh. Is he trying to perform the 1,000 poison martial arts? 1,000 poison martial arts. The highest level for those who were learning poison arts. When someone reached a state where that person could release poison from all over their body. However, there was known to be a limit as to how much the caster could endure. There is intangible poison in my hands. Huh? You mean you managed to do it? There is only one bottle of poison left on me. It was no exaggeration to say that the intangible poison was the best poison produced by the Dang family. This poison, which had neither a form, nor smell, nor taste, was so powerful that once poisoned, even the super master level's warriors cannot help but die. We are lucky that he didn't leave it behind. Aside from its amazing power, it was likely that one would confuse it because of its colorless or odorless properties, so it was a forbidden poison that Yulin had decided to never use. Its formula was extremely complicated and considered a secret. Every poison samples and books regarding it had been discarded, but it was great that some kept that poison hidden. This is the last bottle I have left. I will risk my life to kill that lord of the demonic cult and push him to the underworld. I hope God turns a blind eye to this. Nam Gunkyang looked at Chen Yuan, who was standing on the podium. He was battling with the 7 members of the Blade God 6 martial clan, who were using 7-star extreme blade art. This was supposed to be a trump card prepared by the Blade God 6 martial clan, and it was shocking how they were able to hold up well against Chen Yuan. Ah. This is our chance. When Chen Yuan would turn tired, it seemed like using the poison of the Dang family was possible. I get it. Nam Gunkyang finally gave the permission. As it was already known, he wasn't in a position to kill the Divine Master at his level. There is a chance since this is the intangible poison. If it was such a great poison, then it would surely be able to kill that monster on the podium. However, the use of poison was considered as foul in Wulin. This was the very reason why the 5 strongest warriors were chosen based on their ability to kill people with their own weapons. That was also why monsters like Baek Oh of the demonic cult and the Dang family weren't recognized in Wulin. I will use this body to kill the lord of the demonic cult. If that happens, then the name of my family will have to resonate within Yulin. Dang Pilsun looked sad as he went close to the podium. The closer he got, the more difficult his face seemed. Not only the warriors of the demonic cult, but several other warriors were entangled in fights. He was taking advantage of the gap and kept moving ahead. 9 steps. Quack. Cha-cha-chang. 8 more steps. Dang Pilsun moved forward as much as he could. With minimal movement, Dang Pilsun moved very slowly to avoid getting hit by the battles which were happening around him. As a result, there were 5 steps left. This was enough distance to use the intangible poison. Even Nam Gunkyang's face was turning tense, holding his breath as he looked around at what was happening. Gulp. Gulp. Dang Pilsun took out the vial from his pants and drank it at once. It was something that normal people shouldn't do, but he was someone who was accustomed to poison and his body was trained to fuse with the poison. Wah! This is burning. Even though I am used to it, my body seems to be burning from inside. Such a thing was bound to happen since it was the strongest poison in all of Wulin. Even if the poison fused with the body of Dang Pilsun, it would still bring the death of any divine master. Ugh! Shh. Dang Pilsun, who fused with the intangible poison, was screaming in pain. The vicious poison was emanating from his body and purple energy flowed from his body. Chick. Quack. Poison. Poison user. Even the warriors of the demonic cult who were trying to stop him were bewildered at the sudden energy coming out of Dang Pilsun. They couldn't let someone like him onto the podium. At that moment, a swordsman rushed ahead and blocked the warriors of the demonic cult from coming ahead. Swoosh! Dang Pilsun noticed it as Nam Gunkyong, who was trying to pave the way to the lord of the demonic cult, was coming forward to block the demonic cult's members. Go ahead. Become a hero. Leader. Dang Pilsun was moved by Nam Gunkyong's act. Without any hesitation, he moved towards Chun Yoan, who was on the podium. I am sure to succeed. PSSSSSST. His body was releasing so much poisonous energy that everything which came close to Dang Pilsun's body was melting. Even if he exploded, the explosion would cover up to a radius of 10 meters. Huh? A poison user? Get away. Fat. The 7 masters of the Blade God's 6 martial clan and the 6 swords both looked towards Chun Yoan, while the 7 masters of the Blade God's 6 martial clan were slowly retreating. That was the moment Dang Pilsun had been waiting for. Chun Yoan, the lord of the demonic cult, was standing there, waiting for his death. Dang Pilsun will remain in the hearts of everyone as a hero who contributed to the future of a fair Wulin. Lord of the demonic cult, for justice, you will have to go to the Underu. Dang Pilsun, who was screaming, went speechless. 2 steps away from the podium, he got lifted into the air by Chun Yoan. Floating. What is this? Chun Yoan lightly waved his palm as if he blocked something and looked at the man. Dang Pilsun was so frustrated that he couldn't put it into words. Damn it. He didn't think of this. Who would have predicted that Chun Yoan would hold him in midair? The difference between their skills turned out to be too much. This monster. Maybe I should blow myself up. Dang Pilsun, who was flustered, tried to blow himself up. Are you thinking of committing suicide? I have already felt enough poison until now. You can go to the underworld all alone. What? Jijik. At that moment, his body began to grow cold. Wait a moment, this. KRRR. Before he could even finish what he wanted to say, Dang Pilsun's body turned cold, as if trapped in ice. When he was completely frozen, Chun Yoan pushed the floating and ice-cold body with his hand, as it moved with great speed and fell outside of the castle walls. Swoosh! Bang! Crack! The sound of something falling and exploding outside the castle was heard inside. Nam Gunkyong was at a loss for words as he looked at the black smoke rising outside the castle. Crazy bastard, how did this happen in this way? Chapter 394. Second Generation Chunma. Part 2. Leader Nam Gunkyong was dumbfounded. Dang Pilsun, who was determined to take Chun Yoan down with him, died alone in vain. What had happened was definitely a possibility, but who would have imagined that Dang Pilsun would freeze and blow up? What else does he know? This was a skill that the people of the north could do. Occasionally, Nam Gunkyong saw a few warriors with strong yin and yang handle such skills, but never did he think that Chun Yoan, someone who was yin-based, could do that. Unfortunately for Dang Pilsun, he ended up dead without achieving anything. He is a scary man. Nam Gunkyong truly felt afraid of Chun Yoan. From being frozen to preventing a suicide by blowing himself up right in the midst of an ambush to being thrown out of the castle. Such tremendous ability to judge a situation. If the poison had spread, I would have died a dog's death. If Chun Yoan had thought about his own safety first and pushed Dang Pilsun away, Nam Gunkyong would have gotten involved in the explosion. Then the poison would have also spread inside the castle. That experience helped me. It wasn't intentional, but Chen Youwen was reminded of the time when he competed with Bako. Thanks to the spread of the poison, those who were witnessing the battle and the people of the Blade God's 6 martial clan, who were fighting closely, retreated. If the poison spread within the castle, it would have been a completely different fight. Now there need to be 3 members of the forces of the Great Justice Organization left, including one called Hoju. The organization was already small enough as is, and now one of its members just died. Chen Youwen looked for the next target, meaning Nam Gunkyong, who was right in the middle of the grounds. Is he aiming for the leader of the organization? Me? Nam Gunkyong, who made eye contact with Chen Youwen, couldn't hide his confusion. Chen Youwen looked straight at him after killing one of the members. Nam Gunkyong could feel his heart pounding for some reason. No, it can't be. Is he also aware of my position like the Blade God's 6 martial clan? That was impossible. So why was Chen Youwen looking at him? At that moment, a strange energy began to rise behind Nam Gunkyong. This? Shocked at the sudden energy, Nam Gunkyong turned his head back. Behind him was a young man dressed in a blue hood in an imperial palace uniform. It seemed like he was a warrior of the demonic cult in disguise, just like Chen Youwen. Smirking, the man in the blue hood spoke to him. You are here. Hehe, I found you thanks to my lord. Being called a leader of the forces of justice, who is of high rank, but hides away in the midst of a battle. Chuck. Nam Gunkyong aimed for the man with his sword. On the outside, the young man looked like nothing impressive, but the energy his body was emanating was telling him that this man was a superior master. Who is he? Hu Bong figured out the name of the leader he was aiming at was Nam Gunkyong of the Forces of Justice. In a low-pitched voice and with a thumb pointing to his puffed-out chest, Hu Bong decides to introduce himself. Me? I'm Hu Bong. Hu Bong. It was a name he was hearing for the first time. Among the people of the demonic cult, there were people called the 6 Swords, and they seemed to be introduced for the first time. This one seemed to be someone of importance in the cult too. Of course, he was way higher than the 6 Swords, based on the energy he was emanating. I am the first subordinate of Chun Ma of the Sky Demon Order and the lieutenant of the escorts. Need to know something more? If so, I will let you know. Whoop. With those words, Hu Bong's blade began to generate flames. The flames were ominous and a foreign energy for Nam Gunkyong. It didn't seem like Hu Bong was a man who should be taken lightly just because he was young. If I am not careful, problems will occur. Nam Gunkyong held the sword and looked at the man. Papak. Meanwhile, others appeared on the podium where Chen Youwen was standing. They were the 7 masters of the Blade God's 6 martial clan, who ran away, sensing the poison from Dang Pilsun. Sadness was etched on their faces. I wanted those Yulin men to do something right. It was unfortunate. One of the 7, Master Gaisang, who came up on the podium, walked ahead while mumbling. He was one of the people who hoped Chen Youwen would die from the poison. The poison emitted by Dang Pilsun, who took the poison, was so strong that even they felt it was dangerous to stay close. I wonder if this is called fate. For us, to fight a divine master with our own hands. Open formation. Open formation. Hack. When Gaisang took the flag of their clan, the other 6 masters, who were with him, each took a different stance. 7-star extreme blade art. This was a formation made by the leaders of the clan. This was a formation made to face the most skillful masters in the world. This formation was known to be sophisticated, and it made the power of their attacks many times stronger than an individual who reached the superior master level. The faces of the 7 masters were full of confidence. Probably because they thought that they could fight Chen Youwen on an equal footing. I was nervous because he is a divine master, but this is the best. No, this formation, this attack deserves to be called as the strongest one ever. As the war began, warriors of the Blade God 6 martial clan were burdened by the orders from Sword Master Li Wook. Even the supreme masters in their clan were getting their asses handed to them by the divine master. It was questionable if they could even deal with Chen Yuan on their own. Even if you are a divine master, you aren't invincible. Chen Yuan wasn't as scary as they thought. The fact that they could compete on equal footing with Chen Yuan, a divine master, meant that they had a chance to defeat him. You talk a lot. Are you going to keep talking? Unshaken, Chen Yuan asked him. Gaising smiled at that and answered. I think we did take a long time. Let me tell you that what you see us do was just a prelude to this technique. I'll show you the last and the strongest form of the 7-star extreme blade art. 7-star extreme blade art. At the cry of Gaising, the other superior masters behind him seemed shocked. Chen Yuan's eyes lit up. This is not a formation. This time, it felt safe to assume that force chi was being used to attack him. Cha-cha-cha-cha. Until now, the 7 of them were cleverly creating force chi and were combining their attacks into different attacks. However, this time, all their attacks seemed to merge into one and their power far surpassed the previous ones. He barely stopped the attacks before. With this attack, the lord of the demonic cult might be defeated. Their eyes were clouded in victory. The blue chi with splendid trajectory showed no signs of any gaps whatsoever. It was at that moment. Creep. Suddenly, foreign energy began to rise from Chen Yuan's body. All their eyes narrowed to see what was happening. Is it changing to black? The blue color on the sword Chen Yuan was holding turned into a blackish color. The black sword, which seemed to be demonic in nature, gave everyone an ominous feeling which couldn't be expressed in words. Chen Yuan's body moved for the first time. Swoosh! Ah! His form split into 7 afterimages, exploiting the tiny gaps in their formation. Cha-cha-cha-cha. This makes no sense. How is he doing this all at the same time? The 7 masters, who witnessed that, were shocked. The gap, which Chen Yuan was exploiting with his black sword, was the space where the sword chi connected. We'll have to defend ourselves. If they did anything more than that, they would end up widening the gap and their formation would be ruined. The 7 of them forcibly continued using the sword chi. The final formation of the technique began to emit twice as much as the initial power. I feel like my hands are going to rip apart. But there was something that they couldn't endure. Huh. Geez. Clink. Their right arm, which was their dominant arm, began to hurt and the sword in their hands began to crack and soon broke. Quack. Kook. Crack. Their swords breaking apart was one thing, but their bodies, which seemed to meet with the aftermath of using that formation, got thrown all over. They were pushed to the walls on each side, and no matter how much they tried to defend against the onslaught of attacks, they coughed up blood. Ugh, how can the last formation break this easily? Cough, cough, how could something like this happen? Until recently, we were on equal footing. In addition, the last formation was twice as powerful as the initial one. Finding the gaps should have taken a lot of time, but Chen Yuan didn't just find the gaps, he somehow destroyed them. To the shocked warriors, Chen Yuan spoke. It looks like you are mistaken about something. Mistaken about what? You guys thought you were strong enough to deal with me because of that technique? What? There are 2 reasons why you couldn't deal with me. 2? Well, it isn't like you need to know. Chen Yuan raised his left hand and shook it. Then suddenly, a cold chill began to erupt and a sword made of transparent ice appeared in the air. Geez. The sight itself shocked them. What is that? What is? Chen Yuan waved another hand. Flustered at what was happening, they hurriedly stood up, but even then, 7 ice swords, which didn't exist until a moment ago, cornered them. Float. This is an air sword? They couldn't believe it. Making ice swords was tough enough, but this man was using ice swords as air swords. But more than that, these 7 ice swords were cornering them, ready to take them down any second. What is he trying to do? Chun Yuan's lips slowly turned into a smile and spoke to those who couldn't understand what was happening. Thanks to you, I learned a nice thing. Learned? Well, wait a minute. Swoosh. At that very moment, the ice swords floating around them moved with impeccable harmony. The eyes of the 7 masters of the Blade God 6 martial clan looked like they were going to explode. And nonsense. Shockingly, it was the same formation they performed, 7-star extreme blade art. 7 icy swords spread out and laid up attacks one after another. Slash. 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 Quack. Ack. How could this happen? They all went stiff, not knowing what to do. They even lost their swords as they broke down. Their bodies, which were helpless and weaponless, were torn apart. Tear. What was even more frightening was that any cut through the ice sword made them feel pain and death at the same time. Terminating the system, which combined the schematic of the 7-star extreme blade art. PSSSS. Along with Nano's voice in his head, the ice swords soon lost their color and collapsed. The severed heads of the 7 masters were so startled that all the heads had their eyes wide open. Since I already know the formation, I was able to learn it quickly. Chun Yuan scanned the formation on the spot with the help of Nano. Because of Nano, there was no need for Chun Yuan to use his strength, and when Nano would replay the formation, Chun Yuan understood how the formation worked. If Nano couldn't replay the schematic, it would have taken a long time for Chun Yuan to learn it. That was what Chun Yuan was aiming for. From the first time he saw them unfolding something new, he knew that formation was enhancing the force chi, which was why he deliberately fought them. From the viewpoint of those who suffered, this was nothing less than robbing the treasure. Whoa! The battle of Chun Yuan on the podium was witnessed by the others. The 6 swords, Hu Bong, and even the others who were fighting. All of them had come from the 10,000 mountains for the sake and well-being of their lord. The elders constantly advised him. Lord, you cannot always solve everything on your own. It isn't that you can't handle the enemy, but the warriors in our academy also need to gain practical experience. This was one of the reasons why Chun Yuan battled with those 7 masters of the Blade God 6 martial clan. It was his intention to show his power and his form to the new warriors of the Demonic Academy, as a means for them to see the war and gain experience firsthand. Right. One needs to be strong to follow the strong. Chun Yuan's lips formed into a smile as he looked at his 6 swords who were fighting in the middle of the battlefield. Chapter 395. Second Generation Chun Ma. Part 3. Clang. 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 2 people were fighting fiercely, colliding in the air about 3 times until they stepped on the ground. They were Emok, great leader of the Yulin, and Sword Master Li Wook. Their actions and their movements seemed to be at such a high level that everyone acknowledged them as supreme masters. In close distance, they would use their weapons to strike each other, and when the distance grew between them, they would use air swords to constantly collide, making everyone break out in cold sweat. Phew, phew. Sword Master Li Wook was gasping for air. It was a short battle, but there were a few attacks that were directly aimed at him to take his life. I thought that even if you were one of the 5 strongest warriors, he wouldn't be this tough of an opponent, but his skills are worthy of his reputation. Li Wook calmly analyzed the current confrontation. In close combat, even though he was using the extreme art of Blade God, he was being pushed back. And when he tried to corner Emok with force chi and air swords, Li Wook was the one getting close to being killed. I'll have to take my chance with close combat. Although the defense of Emok seemed great, it seemed to be a level lower than Li Wook's. This was going to be a fight of stamina. Li Wook would have to deal with Emok quickly so he could join in and help the 7 masters who he sent to deal with Chen Yuan. However, something unexpected happened. What? Sword Master Li Wook's expression hardened. A short distance away, he watched the battle between Chen Yuan and the 7 masters who were supposed to be working together. No way. Suddenly, he saw pieces of ice on the podium. There was something on the podium that he recognized, the head of one of the masters. Did he defeat all 7 of them? Li Wook was well aware of how great the 7-star extreme blade art was, as he personally competed with those 7. Even though he knew the schematic for making it work, he found it hard to tackle the technique no matter how much he tried. Shit. We are in trouble. The fact that the 7 of them were defeated meant that there was no one else in the Jin castle to keep Chen Yuan in check. Sword Master Li Wook, who was in shock, made a decision. This isn't the time for me to lament. 2 of their tricks ended up getting broken and they were left with the last trick. And the last trick had to be used when the forces of the Great Heavens Organization and the forces of evil were still high in number. Where are you looking at with the other eye? After those words 3 air swords came in fast. Huh. Papa Pack. Sword Master Li Wook quickly created a curtain of force chi, blocked the air swords, and shouted at the people in the castle. Implement the other strategy. Yes. The moment his command fell, the eyes of the surviving 65 warriors of the Blade God's 6 martial clan, who were competing with Yulin and the demonic cult, began to turn red and the muscles of the whole body began to swell as well. Tuk 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 tuk. The clothes on the upper body started being ripped apart and their body stature was close to the one of a giant. Rather than human beings, they looked more like monsters. That was noticeable from anywhere on the battlefield. Huh? This is? Blood reversion art? Flustered by the sudden change, the other warriors began to keep their distance from the warriors of the Blade God's 6 martial clan. Blood reversion art? No, this is different. There were warriors in the demonic cult who experienced the blood reversion art with their very own eyes. Their veins didn't pop out and neither were these warriors crying out like beasts. This was the completed blood reversion art. Is this their hidden trump card? Nam Gunkyong, who was fighting with Hubong, also sensed the change in the castle grounds. That man is quite clever. Their hidden trump card is similar to his. Nam Gunkyong's eyes narrowed. The fact that the sword master of the Blade God's 6 martial clan used this meant that they were at a disadvantage in this war. Which meant that there was no need for him to save his hidden trump card either. It isn't over yet. Hup. A truly tenacious one. Strictly speaking, Hubong was 1 level lower than him. And it hasn't been long since Hubong took a step forward. Only after taking in the fire did changes occur. He didn't have any practice fights to understand his newly found skills, yet, he was trying his best to be on the same level as Nam Gunkyong. Cha-cha-chaka-chak. Nam Gunkyong's sword was keeping Hubong in check, who was rushing in like a crazed man. He was too excited with the level up. Cha. Yuk. Nam Gunkyong's sword passed through Hubong's thighs as he couldn't defend himself. Thanks to that, Hubong's movement slowed down a bit. This is the time. Nam Gunkyong took a flute which was hanging around his neck and blew into it. He blew it hard. Beek. Ah. As the sound of the flute resounded throughout the battlefield, some of the heads of the factions, who joined the organization, took out something they prepared in. Advance. The sound of the flute was a signal to initiate the plan. Their hands held a needle and after taking a deep breath, they pierced a specific blood vessel between their back and neck. For the clear blue sky. Puck. Quack. What are these men doing? The act of stabbing themselves in the middle of a fight was strange to see. Even though they thought that it was a strange act, the warriors of the demonic cult didn't miss the opportunity to attack them. While the members of the organizations were momentarily stiff, many of them got stabbed. But something even more shocking happened. Those who were cut by the swords didn't seem to feel any pain, or was that simply their way to handle the pain? Moreover, their movements seemed to differ from the previous. Not only were they more agile, but their physical strength seemed to have doubled. It was to the point where every strike was aiming to cut someone down. Clang. Clang. How did they get stronger so suddenly? What are they doing? After stabbing their necks, they seemed like completely different people. Even more frightening than being strong was to not feel any pain. I cut his arm too. Even when an arm was cut off, the members of the forces of Great Heaven attacked without any changes in their expression. Not only did they not feel any pain, but they turned fully expressionless. As if their emotions disappeared, they were making it seem like they were fighting a non-human being. They plagiarized our skill. Seeing that, crazy sword master, Chun, who was fighting with the great guardian Mara Kim, went stiff. What was there seemed to be used by the forces of Great Heaven? They did something interesting. The corners of his mouth rose. This was supposed to be a technique which made the body capable enough to artificially perfect their clan's teachings, which exceeded the limits of the human body. And the ones who managed to master it were the 6 martial masters of the Blade God's 6 martial clan and the Blade Lord. The forces of Great Heaven had stolen a relic by that man which held the secret to using this technique. Do they not feel pain anymore? Moreover, it seemed like an improved version, a perfect weapon for killing. A monster which had no emotions. Great. If we get out of this war safely, we can rip this art from them. That definitely were some good news. Chun pointed to the changing situation with his left hand. Can you see that? This is just the beginning. Now you will witness my true power. From now on, it's going to be a slaughter. Quack quack quack. Marikim's eyes narrowed through his mask. He did guess that some hidden cards must have been there for the Blade God's 6 martial clan and the divided Yulin, but he never guessed that they would use humans as weapons. This situation made him lose a little bit of confidence. In that moment, Marikim's mind perceived a message. Great Guardian, practical experience for the warriors ends here. It was Chun Yoan's voice. Mara Kim, who heard the message, couldn't help but chuckle. Right. I need to make sure that the slaughter happens through my hands. What nonsense, huh? The puzzled expression of Chun turned to the air. Something felt odd, someone seemed to have stepped into the air. The person was the Lord of Demonic Cult, Chun Yoan. No. There was no way others wouldn't notice him. Wind God Step Skill. Whoa. He was unfolding the Wind God Step skill, which was known to be close to divinity. It was something that anyone who reached Supreme Master level could do, but if you go one step further. Whoa. He's practically floating in the air. Chun Yoan, who reached the middle of the Jin castle in the air, was floating. More like flying in the sky. This seemed different from the level of walking or using air for balance with internal energy. Captivated by the feeling, Sword Master Li Wook stopped his fight with Emok for a moment and lashed out. Lord of the Demonic Cult. You bastard. What are you planning on doing? Papapapak. Sword Master Li Wook swung his left hand and fragments of rocks flew towards Chun Yoan, who was in the air. However, the fragments flying towards Chun Yoan stopped and then fell to the ground as if they lost power. He reached out his hand and every fragment stopped. Tutututuk. Why is it not working? Li Wook was proud of his skills, but no matter what he did, it didn't work for Chen Yuan. It was as if every attack that was connected with force chi was being eroded. Chen Yuan opened his mouth, looking down at Li Wook and the other warriors, and said, "You brought this upon yourselves." "We what?" Everyone seemed puzzled at the cynical words of Chen Yuan, who seemed to be in anger. What the hell was he trying to do, from the middle of the castle? Drrrr. What is that? It is shaking. A strong vibration on the ground. At that moment, normal warriors, who were exhausted and had fallen to the ground, had their weapons raised into the air. Eh? Everyone was shocked, looking at how the warriors' weapons were rising into the air. But that wasn't the end. Eek! Among the warriors, there were the forces of Great Heaven, the forces of evil and the North Justice Blade. They were shaking and trying to get their weapons back into their hands. Ike! My sword! Those with high skills held on to their weapons, but those who were mere beginners lost their weapons. Around 200 people's weapons were floating in the air. The appearance of the warriors' weapons floating in the castle was nothing short of a spectacular sight. Oh my god! They are really all. Everyone turned still. The weapons of the warriors soon began to be controlled like air swords. That occurrence made people forget about the battles they were in. Everyone looked at the sky and no one took another step. Thud. No. Impossible. Even if he is at Divine Master level, not a single person can use more than a dozen air swords. Sword Master Li Wook shook his head. It was only a waste of energy to control so many weapons in the air. Who would be able to stop the attack from weapons, which would suddenly come from the air? The swords will drop. Defend yourself with everything. At the shout of Li Wook, the warriors of the Blade God 6 martial clan, as well as the warriors from other factions, held their weapons tightly. Chen Yuan looked down at the people on the castle grounds and ordered Nano. Nano, target designation. Enable multi-lock-on system. Numerous red-shaped lines formed in Chen Yuan's augmented reality, and Nano's voice resonated in his head. Pip 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 pip. When all the targets got locked onto, Chen Yuan raised his internal energy. That was when something happened. Whoa! Whoa! Gasps erupted from everywhere. That's ridiculous. These are all air swords? Just controlling one sword was amazing enough already, but 200 swords in the sky at the same time was like a constellation twinkling in the sunlight. Is he even human? The leaders of the forces of justices, heads of the Yulin clans, even Emok looked up in the sky in shock. Looking at the forces of evil, Blade God 6 martial clan and forces of Great Heaven's organization, who were looking up, Chen Yuan spoke. I have a name for this one. Sky Flash. Sky Flash? Wait, no. Li Wook shouted with anxiousness on his face. Chen Yuan's hand slowly pointed to their direction. Swoosh! Swoosh! At that moment, the eyes of the Wulin people who were in the castle looked into the sky to see the numerous swords. This wasn't a technique. This power, which unfolded with 200 swords, was, to their surprise, the most powerful sword attack, Sky Flash. The swords, which filled the sky of Jin Castle, fell down like raindrops, and in an instant, the castle seemed to be covered with light. Baba bang! This is crazy! AV, avoid it! Run away! Screams and shouts from all over the castle grounds could be heard, but it soon turned into wails. Quack! Arg! The phrase, lighting up, wouldn't be enough. As Chen Yuan named it, it was like a sky flash, a small beam of light that shined and killed everything the very next instant. As shocking as it was, the swords only rushed towards the enemies. Quack 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 wang. As he watched the enemies being torn apart right in front of him, the great leader, Emok, mumbled with gleaming eyes. Ah, he is Chun Ma. The Chun Ma has returned. Chapter 396. Second Generation Chun Ma. Part 4. Quack quack wang. The entire castle ground seemed to be colored blue. The power of the air swords that fell from the sky were more like a meteor shower in bringing destruction than anything else. The destruction was so large that all of the Yulin clans, the forces of evil, the Blade God's 6 martial clan, and even the people of the demonic cult couldn't help but be in awe. Kayak. Is this really power coming from a human? Help me. The forces of evil, who were relatively weak, were in a mess. Every single time the blue light sword descended from the sky, it blew up the ground. Their people were either hurt or had their bodies shattered to pieces. Defend. Defend yourselves. The 17 river families, including Gar Mojum, who led the troops, shouted, but it was to no avail. The power emitted by the Divine Master seemed to be on a whole different level from what they had imagined. Ma Master. We need to run for it. That man is a monster, bang. One of the 17 river families, who advised Gar Mojum to escape, were hit by the sky flash technique and disappeared in an instant. Puck. Gar Mojum's face flushed red while looking at the bloodshed around him. What he was facing was truly a force beyond the realm and capabilities of human beings. Huh? Pajak. Quack. He hurriedly avoided the sky flash air sword that was coming for him. He tried to defend himself with his sword, but his 2 hands, which were holding onto the sword, began to hurt as if they were about to crack from inside. What power is this? Comparing that power to a regular technique seemed wrong. Each attack of the sky flash air sword had the power to annihilate the head of elite warriors in a single shot. Gar Mojum was truly frightened. Even if Chen Yuan was at the Divine Master level, the assumption that 3 forces joining hands would be enough to subdue Chen Yuan was a clear misunderstanding on their part. This monster can annihilate everyone in this place. He wasn't sure if another Divine Master could do it. But witnessing Chen Yuan's power, it seemed more than possible. The slaughter that was happening inside the castle grounds was enough proof of that. Warriors were dying helplessly due to the non-stop rain of swords. Only those who were at the superior master level or above seemed to have a chance. Did we touch a monster that shouldn't have been touched? Crack. Quack. Does this much power even make sense? Nam Dungkyang of the forces of Great Heaven couldn't help but be shocked by the air swords that were coming for them. Even he, who had reached superior master level, could barely block it. Even more shocking was this. Swoosh. Bang. Bang. Move away. If you get too close, you will be hit. Crazy. How can one avoid the air swords that are chasing us? Quack. More than 200 air swords poured down on the enemies as if it was snowing. It was as if 200 warriors were handling the swords for their leader. This is a technique where the air sword and the force chi turn into one. No matter how skilled he is, how can he control so many at once? Conceptually, it was impossible. It was all Nano's computing that made this possible. The combination of a multi-lock-on and a panel-based system on the computation power of Nano, which was known to be the future of aggregate technologies, has helped in evolving the air sword technique into a truly disastrous level. It is fortunate that we don't feel any pain. As they managed to remove the sense of pain and emotion, they were able to move regardless of any injuries. Bang! In fact, even though their limbs were cut off, the speed at which the people pierced the back of their necks with needles didn't change. But Nano. Aim for their heads. Understood. Specified the detailed parts of the targets as headshots. The beams of the force chi aimed for their heads. Even those who were unable to feel any pain got their heads blown away. As they weren't immortal, they simply died off without being able to do anything. Bang! 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 The bodies of those who lost their heads staggered a couple more steps and then helplessly fell to the ground. He is aiming for the heads. Nam Gunkyong's expression distorted. By now, more than half of them had turned into corpses already. As a result, things changed. It can't be, are they all afraid? Just because one couldn't feel pain didn't mean that all their cognitive abilities were clouded. It would be even stranger if they wouldn't be scared, despite knowing that they were all going to be killed. Hubong walked in front of Nam Gunkyong. Seeing how happy he looked, it seemed like he was proud of Chun Yuan's thrilling display of power. I have to finish my task too. And now isn't the time for pack. Nam Gunkyong defended himself from the flying air sword. He was too nervous and angry at the sky flash air sword, but he didn't even have a second to breathe. However, even Hubong was attacking him now. Despite that situation, Nam Gunkyong, who was angry at the change in battle and the man who was aiming for him, performed a special superscript 1* sword technique, which was close to completion. Chow chow chow. It was then. Creep. A blue force swept down the head of Nam Gunkyong, who was gathering energy. Nam Gunkyong used his sword to block Hubong's flame sword, not even giving him a single break. You coward! Chachachakan. Hubong's flames had nothing to do with his internal energy, as they were his natural energy, which made it much easier for him to wield the sword without getting exhausted. In an instant, Nam Gunkyong's left arm flew off when Hubong used his sword of illusion. Quack! Nam Gunkyong, who had never been defeated in his life, was defeated by Hubong, who was a level lower than him. His face was red in shame. Meanwhile, Li Wook, one of the 6 martial masters, couldn't help but be astonished by the sky flash air sword's technique. What the hell is all of this? It was a situation he couldn't understand, even though he had mastered martial arts and force chi too. It was shocking how accurate the swords were falling on Chun Yuan's enemies without a single mistake, while also accurately aiming for the heads. Bang! 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 Arg! Kook! Even those who used the blood reversion art were no different from the forces of the great heavens warriors who got their heads destroyed at once. However, the only difference was that those of the Supreme Master level, who had great internal energy due to their constant training, were able to stand their ground unlike the superior Master warriors. Swoosh! Spread away and stop it. They were struggling while blocking the swords falling from the sky. If there were no other enemies, the damage would have been minimal. But with the leaders of the forces of justice from Yulin taking the demonic cult side and attacking them without missing the opportunity, the extent of the damage only increased. Lord, help me to get rid of the enemies. Wah! Because of that, their morale rose and they ended up turning it into a battle that couldn't be compared with anything. It was more of a slaughter than a battle. The strong smell of blood filled the castle ground. If things go on like this, we will be annihilated. Our plans have already been unsuccessful. Should we retreat to avoid any further sacrifices? Sword Master Li Wook wasn't sure on what had to be done. Even if they left the Jin Castle now, they would only be able to save minimum power. It was then. Li Wook's eyes narrowed at the sudden scream in the midst of the battlefield. At first, he was shocked to see the non-human ability that the Lord of the demonic cult was displaying, a power he couldn't ever hope to stand up against, but then an idea struck him. Even if he is a divine master, there is a limit as to what a human can do. Even he, who, in order to use 12 air swords, would shorten the distance to have control over them for a longer period of time. Now Chen Yuan was using amounts of air swords that were 10 times the actual number, which consumed a terrifying amount of energy. Kwa kwa kwa. the entire castle grounds were destroyed. He already killed half of the number of warriors, so Chen Yuan might be soon reaching his limit. Now, if I hold on a little longer, I may have the chance to aim for the life of that monster. If not now, when else would I have the chance to kill him? The only chance for a turnaround. It completely changed his thoughts about retreating. I need the consent of the other sword masters, too. Cha Yunkong was dealing with the Dark King, Mara Kim, when he sent a telepathic message to Li Wook. Sword Master Li Wook, if things go like this, we will be annihilated. Even if we are being reprimanded, the only way to survive this situation is to collect our men and retreat right away. That monster is much stronger than us. They knew that the plan would completely fail. There still is a way. What way? At Li Wook's statement, the other two masters asked with a questionable expression what he meant. Although sacrifices seemed reckless and inevitable, if the plan worked and made sense, it would be a big achievement nonetheless. If we fail this time, do you think we will be able to defend ourselves any longer? Even with his divine master level, no matter how skilled Chen Yuan was, he was bound to run out of strength sooner or later. The cautious one, No Du Kyung, didn't like the idea, but Cha Yunkong agreed with the plan immediately. Good. Li Wook was pleased after receiving their consent. Keep going. No matter how long, you must endure this. Yes. He tried his best to boost the morale of the warriors who were barely holding on. It was his role as a representative of the Blade God's 6 martial clan to maintain morale in the face of despair. Quack-quack-quack-wang. By the time it came to an end, a change occurred inside the castle grounds, which were so destroyed that it was impossible to recognize them. The swords, which were aiming for the heads and were shining like stars in the noon sky, lost their power. Tap 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 tap. There was only one explanation for it. Finally, Chen Yuan, the lord of the demonic cult, the divine master, has finally exhausted his internal energy. Li Wook's eyes flashed at the opportunity. The eyes of the surviving enemies inside the castle soon looked at Chen Yuan, who was floating in the air. Swoosh! Chen Yuan began to reach the ground as if he couldn't float in the air anymore. It was then. Pat. 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 Ah! The warriors of the demonic cult shouted in shock. Lord! Don't! It's too dangerous. 3 people suddenly rushed towards Chen Yuan, who stopped floating and came back to the ground. The 3 sword masters of the Blade God's 6 martial clan, who were waiting for Chen Yuan's internal energy to get exhausted, used this opportunity to finally kill the lord of the demonic cult. Were they aiming for this moment? Emok wondered if this was why they didn't retreat even though they were in a very unfavorable situation. He was desperately holding on to the battle while avoiding getting hurt, so while waiting for Li Wook to give his best, Li Wook's goal had always been the death of the lord of the demonic cult. He must have been arrogant thinking he was invincible. I have been waiting for this moment. Lord of the demonic cult, you need to die here. The 3 sword masters were ready to kill him at any point and time. It was this exact moment they had been waiting for. Their only chance to kill the lord of the demonic cult. Cha-cha-cha-cha. They began to raise their internal energy, ready to take on any form to kill Chen Yuan. However, among the 3, No Du Kyung, who was aiming for Chen Yuan, noticed something. Chen Yuan, who should have been at least a little worried, was actually smiling. He's smiling? It didn't feel right. This was supposed to drive Chen Yuan into a corner, so why was he smiling? No Du Kyung, who got worried, was about to warn the other 2, when Chen Yuan spoke to them. Did you think that you'd have the chance to kill me once I exhausted my energy? How did he know that? All 3 of them were surprised. In front of their bewildered eyes, something even more surprising happened. An ominous energy began to rise from Chen Yuan's body, causing a shiver to run down their spines. Swoosh! At that moment, Chun Yuan's left hand brought out a cold ice sword and his right hand held a flame sword. The moment the swords came into view, the three of them said the same thing. Invisible sword. What Chun Yuan had just displayed, who was believed to have exhausted his strength, was the legendary invisible sword which only a divine master can unleash. Shit! Did he fool us? Chapter 397. Second Generation Chun Ma. Part 5. Sword Master Li Wuxi's judgment was correct. Even if one was a divine master, as long as he was a human, there was a limit to what he could do. It was normal for one, even for a divine master, to end up opening a gap when all the internal energy was exhausted. If it went according to plan, this could be their big win. Except that there were two things he hadn't guessed correctly. This unbelievable amount of internal energy. Does this mean that this much amount of internal energy is left despite firing all those air swords for an extended period of time? The amount of internal energy possessed by a divine master, which was vaguely speculated by Sword Master Li Wuxi, was not even comparable to the Supreme Master level. This was because the internal energy in Chun Yuan seemed different. To be able to hold the air swords and control them with that accuracy made everything seem weird already. That was why they aimed for the moment when Chun Yuan would stop using the Sky Flash air sword. Did you think that you'd have the chance to kill me once I exhaust my energy? Fools. Ugh, this guy. Does this mean that he only pretended to exhaust his inner strength? This plan was supposed to be excellent, but Sword Master Li Wuxi didn't realize that someone could fool him too. Shockingly, Chun Yuan deliberately acted like that to deceive him. No. Was he trying to take advantage of this situation? What kind of man is he? They never imagined that, even in such a situation, he would try to deceive them. It was like Chun Yuan was looking into their minds. What was more dangerous than the strong people were the ones who were not only strong, but also intelligent. And recently, the cause for all their failures ended up being this one person only. This guy is way too dangerous. For a brief moment that was what passed through their minds. However, even if they realized it, the invisible sword of Force Chi, which was radiating black flames and black ice, was already ready to attack the three martial masters. Wing. Geez. In the end, there seemed to be no escape. They had no other choice but to face the legendary invisible sword. Kook. Nothing more we can do about it. Even then. In terms of power, there was bound to be a difference, but they prided themselves for possessing and surpassing the extreme martial body. Even in the battles before, one of the 5 strongest warriors, Mok, was also pushed back. HIA. Aiming at Chun Yuan's feet, no, Duqian unfolded blade ascension, a technique of the blade art. Crazy Sword Master, Cha Yun Kong, unfolded his sword strike, one of the most extreme moves. And Sword Master Li Wuxi aimed for Chun Yuan's heart with the 5th formation of the extreme art of Blade God. Cha-cha-cha-cha. Such speed. Were such skills ever existent before? The techniques were so eye-catching that everyone was amazed by it. These were the supposed techniques of the Blade God, who was known to be the best in all of Wulin. Even within the warriors of the Blade God's 6 martial clan, the only ones who had properly mastered the essence of the Blade God were the 6 martial masters and the Blade Lord. The power they were wielding in their hands right now was difficult to compare to what they used before. But still. Is he using different forces of Qi with both hands? The eyes of the 3 sword masters, who were in a desperate situation, went wide. Shockingly, the black ice sword in Chun Yuan's left hand and the black flame sword in his right hand were made of different force Qi. Moreover, the black ice sword on his left hand felt familiar for some reason. The technique unfolding in Chun Yuan's left hand was the extreme blade art. This was something Li Wuxi had learned his whole life, there was no way he wouldn't recognize it. No way. How can that guy use this technique? They couldn't help but be shocked. It wasn't someone else, but Chun Yuan, the lord of the demonic cult, who was displaying the extreme blade art. It even seemed more vigilant than when they were using it. The three masters were shocked when the swords from Chun Yuan came for them. Kook. Cha-cha-cha-cha. The force chi attacks, which were performed by all of them, clashed violently. Everyone in the Jin castle held their breath and watched the confrontation. The Divine Master versus the three Supreme Masters. The confrontation between superhumans, which couldn't be seen anywhere else, was unfolding in front of their eyes. What would the results be? What the hell is this? However, before long, the three sword masters were turning tired. Weird things were happening while they unfolded their force chi. Cha Yun Kong, who was tackling the black ice sword, would suddenly freeze. JRRRK. What kind of cold chi is this? It was cold enough to halt his movements. Not just that, Li Wook and No Dukyang seemed to be having trouble with the black flame sword. Is this really a type of sword chi? No Dukyang, who was skilled in fire chi, tried to create fire, but his fire was nothing in comparison to the black flame. Cha-cha-chang. Although they had fallen into Chun Yuan's trap, they were still three of the six martial masters who predicted that they would have an equal chance of killing Chun Yuan if they worked together. However, conflicting results clearly showed them the difference between a Divine Master and Supreme Master level warriors. Before they could even grasp the situation, changes were constantly taking place. Avoid it! Li Wook urgently shouted at Cha Yun Kong. Constantly freezing the attacks from Cha Yun Kong with the ice, Chun Yuan's black ice sword almost cut his head off. Ugh! Flustered, Cha Yun Kong quickly moved to the left, but his reactions were already slowing down. Chun Yuan's black ice sword dug right into his right shoulder. Puck! Cough! Blood gushed out of Cha Yun Kong's mouth. A very chilling cold penetrated his shoulder. The piercing cold felt more like a cut than anything. He desperately wanted to get out of there, move away and create some distance, but he simply couldn't. Jerk! Aha! A scream erupted from Cha Yun Kong. The sword, which pierced his shoulder, suddenly cut his upper body in half. Split in half in such a dreadful manner, his body fell to the floor. Crack! Shockingly, the body of Cha Yun Kong froze and shattered into ice cubes as it touched the ground. Kook! This man is acting nothing like a human. Li Wook began to rethink his plan. What was supposed to be balanced by the three of them now turned into a battle of two, one of them dead. There was no way they could handle a Divine Master now. You shouldn't look elsewhere in a battle. What? Puck! Fire! Ugh! The black flame sword pierced No Dukyang's left thigh. It was burning away the flesh by releasing black smoke. I am not able to put out the flame. He tried raising his internal energy and focused on his thigh, but instead of driving out of the flame, it seemed like it was alleviating the pain. This is messed up. We can't fight this monster. We can only escape from here. Due to the burning pain, No Dukyang came to the conclusion that he couldn't kill the lord of the demonic cult. Which meant that continuing the battle would be nothing less than dying a dog's death. At least with the remaining power he had left, he had to do something worthwhile. His left leg was already hurt, which meant it was impossible for him to get out of the place. I failed this time, but next time the same mistake won't happen. No Dukyang looked at Li Wook with a bitter smile. What use was holding on to life after reaching 70? If he could save the young one beside him, it felt like his death wouldn't be in complete vain. No Dukyang's lips formed into a stiff smile while looking at Li Wook. Li Wook, who looked at him, was trembling while looking at the stab wound in No Dukyang's thigh. Should I run away? Li Wook could guess what was running through No Dukyang's mind. Li Wuke was about to shout no, but No Dukyang threw himself at Chen Yuan. It was at that moment when No Dukyang went closer. Bang! No Dukyang took the red sword into his hand and slammed it into the ground. At that moment, as the floor cracked beneath the sword, 8 swords rushed for Chen Yuan. Cha-cha! It was the 8 swords of Blade God technique. The 8 swords, which encircled Chen Yuan, displayed an incredible amount of explosive power. Although they were close to him, Chen Yuan knew the major flaw of this technique. The heart of the formation. All that was needed was to attack the heart, and soon after the technique would start crumbling down. A simple weakness, however, not many would have the courage to enter the middle of the 8 swords. Swoosh! Chen Yuan boldly stabbed the black flame sword in the center of the formation where the 8 swords were placed. He knows this too. Looking at Chen Yuan, No Dukyang's eyes narrowed. There was no way one could know the weakness of it without learning the technique, but Chen Yuan was able to act rather fast. Woo! Quack! Chen Yuan moved close and his sword pierced the heart of No Dukyang. However, something unexpected happened. No Dukyang, who should have died because of that, suddenly hugged Chen Yuan. Crack! Muscles began to bulge from No Dukyang's upper body. He hugged Chen Yuan with all his might, even when he was suffering. It worked. Being aware of the formation, I knew that you would come right into the center, which was the weak point of the formation. It was a trap laid out by No Dukyang to stop him. He was prepared to face death, so he decided to let Chen Yuan get close to him. While he unfolded the technique, he also used the blood reversion art so the black flame sword wouldn't penetrate his heart. As No Dukyang caught Chen Yuan, he yelled with all his might. Go and run away. Short order. But everyone knew what that meant. The surviving forces of evil and forces of great heaven, even the remaining warriors of the Blade God 6 martial clan, ran without looking back. Catch them. Don't let them get away. All the warriors of the demonic cult and Yulin who heard that command couldn't just let them run away. They tried their best to block the wall and prevent them from escaping. However, those who survived the Sky Flash Air Sword were the most powerful ones, so the resistance wasn't enough to stop them. Besides, even with their arms cut off? Are they really unable to feel any pain? Whether cut off or not, the warriors of the forces of Great Heaven didn't stop climbing up the wall. They already lost the battle, so at the very least they wanted to live. However, since their number was small, they could get caught at any time. Great Guardian Mara Kim and Dual Martial Sword Wang Jing tried to catch Li Wuke, who tried to escape by jumping over the eastern wall. However, the moment they reached him, they were blocked off by the warriors of the Blade God 6 martial clan, who were of the superior master level and had already unfolded the blood reversion art. We are not letting you touch him. You need to pass through us to get to Sword Master Li Wuke. No matter how great the two were, they couldn't take down so many superior master level warriors at once. They were all ready to die if it meant getting that one person out of the castle. That one shouldn't be allowed to go. Meanwhile, Li Wuke jumped over the wall. He wasn't the kind to abandon an opportunity created by his people who were risking their lives for his sake. Bulge. The muscles of the upper body were larger than Ko Wanger's, and the eyes of No Dukyang, who was holding Chen Yuan, shook. Shake. Quack. He was a man who reached the highest limit of human beings by using the blood reversion art. Naturally, he prided himself for being beyond normal warriors, but even then, holding Chen Yuan felt like his muscles were about to break. What kind of power is this? It made no sense. He, who reached Supreme Master level, was using the blood reversion art, yet he was having such a tough time. It was natural since the opponent was a divine master. But still, how could a single human possess so much power? Well, I managed to give them time. Even if no one else could escape, Li Wuk had to be the only one to do so. That was the most important thing. Tremble. The muscles within both arms were torn to shreds, and soon after blood began to gush out. There was a limit to how long he could tie a divine master down. Lord of the demonic cult, you are a monster. How about we head down towards the underworld together? Tremble. When No Dukyang's body trembled, the blood vessels began to pop. In the blood reversion art, there was a secret of self-destruction by letting one's internal energy explode. The higher the internal energy, the stronger and bigger the explosion. He was sure that no one would be able to withstand that explosion. Even a monster like you won't survive this time. Everyone before you said the same thing. What? It was at that moment. Crack. Quack. Electric shocks began to spread in Chen Yuan's body and shortly after reached No Dukyang. The moment his body met with the shock, Chen Yuan's arms began to get stronger. And No Dukyang, who was holding him down, was getting torn apart from the inside. Tear. Quack. No Dukyang, whose arms were torn, screamed in pain. Due to the sacrifice, Li Wuk managed to escape the castle and already headed east. He already ran to a far-off distance with all the might he could gather. In his view, the castle soon turned small. Quack. Li Wuk's eyes were filled with shame as he ran, yet he survived and had to pass the information to the others. Drip. Blood was dripping from his mouth. One thing was clear. They are the enemies who had to be eliminated. If they didn't kill Chen Yuan, the lord of the demonic cult, their generation would end up dead. Enjoy this victory now, lord of the demonic cult. No matter how strong you are, there is always a weakness. There were plenty of ways to take Chen Yuan down, even if it wasn't a direct confrontation. For example, if his precious members were kidnapped, no matter how cold Yuan was, he wouldn't stop from shaking in fear. Though he didn't turn back and ran like a coward, Li Wuk vowed to himself. If he comes back, the lord of the demonic cult will disappear from Wulin. Puck. Quack. Sword Master Li Wuk looked down on his chest, which was burning him slowly. Crackle. Smoke began to flow out with the sound of burning. Shockingly, the black flame sword pierced through his chest. This is. It was the black flame sword, the invisible sword which Chen Yuan, lord of the demonic cult, was using. Sword Master Li Wuk turned his head towards the Jin castle with an absurd look.